Recently, I made a video about Edwin and how he affected Henry and Fredbear in the lore. And I gotta say, that video is ass. When I was playing Secret of the Mimic, I basically felt this, and I was like, I have to express. But expressing is not the same as being factual. I got a few comments that were very informative and actually reminded me and told me about things that I even saw with my own eyes, but I just totally forgot because I was so blinded by rage. So basically, we're gonna go through that old video and go, who this dingus and what he's saying, cause it ain't true, bro. And generally debunking, correcting, thanks to everyone's input. So this comparison that I made, that Edwin and Henry follow the same broad strokes as a character, it's not exactly right, and some people caught on. I did not, until I uploaded the video, listened to it, and I just went, oh my. Because here's the thing, I was confusing book Henry and game Henry. The whole replacing your child with a robot and getting stabbed by your own creation, that's a book thing. That's in this guy. Alright, that's not in the games. That's in this guy right here. And they're not exactly the same. They're close, they're similar, but they're not the same. This is not game canon. See, the closest we get to that Henry in the games is FNAF World, where he's like, I made the creation that I don't know if I can control. He dies at the desk. But that's in FNAF World, and FNAF World isn't really a representation of what goes on in the actual canon. The current idea of FNAF World is that it's a crying child's memories. The only canonical appearance of Henry in the games comes from Pizza Sim, where, he's just this mysterious cassette man, and he has that badass monologue, and then he just... But the only comparison you can make with Edwin and game Henry is really just they both work with machines. Really, that's it. Edwin isn't really robbing Henry of any unique character arc, because in the games, that arc belongs to Edwin. He loses the child, he makes the child, and, all that. It doesn't clash with Henry from the games. Even if it does clash a little bit with the Henry from the books, doesn't really matter. Separate guys, separate timelines, man. Then it's my points and absolute meltdown with the spring locks. What I said was that the spring locks that were in the demo room were definitely meant to be the animatronics from the diner from 1983. I still kind of think that, not exactly. I also complained about how the spring locks and the prototypes have a huge quality shift in them, and that doesn't make any sense. I'll get to that in a little bit, but that it does make sense. I also said that the spring locks were probably used during the Fall Fest, which I still think is pretty relevant. I think that's a fair point. And I said that these were the first diner animatronics. Not the first spring lock animatronics, but the first diner animatronics. Which is categorically wrong. In my own playthrough of Secret of the Mimic, I even looked at Fredbear's Family Diner's advertisements and went, I know that guy! That's the guy that was the guy on the car! A guy at the car, the little bobblehead of the car. I totally forgot that I absorbed that information. Like I mentioned in the video, the bobblehead shows that the character's already established. The advertisement shows that it's already being advertised, and there was a comment that mentioned that there are boxes all over the place that belong to the diner, but I didn't see them. But I'll take him out at the word for it. Essentially, the diners already exist. Diners, plural. Or maybe it's always just been the one diner, and these are just replacements. Back to what I was saying about how I think these are the 83 animatronics, but not really. What I mean by that is that I think they're meant to be the 83 animatronics, and I really want them to become the 83 animatronics, but the canon ending kind of ends up with everything being on fire and broken, so I don't know if they actually managed to survive. So they might just have been prototypes that then got trashed, and then Henry had to build them anyways. If they survived, that would be an example of Edwin taking a bit of Henry's story, which is the whole thing that I was raving about last time. But it's not a big part of the story, just a small part. Just a small part, and I think it's forgivable. Now, I've seen a lot of people in the comments talk about how they still think Henry made the spring locks, like the original ones, like the concept of spring lock. I've even heard some people say Afton made the spring locks. I don't think either of those are correct. The way that they introduced the director's suit in that part of Secret of the Mimic, it really sounds like the spring locks was an Edwin creation. Edwin's design of the spring locks appears to be a lot safer. You're wearing a spring lock and you are in a collapsing building in the game, and you don't get William Afton, you know? So they're clearly a lot better. But in an email from Edwin, he talks about the animatronics intended for the diner. 83 diner? I think so. He says that they worked fine even with the water damage, which people take as, wow, the suits are so good, even with water damage, they're safe. But, two things about that. Number one, he ends the email by saying, I should probably let Henry know that these suits behave kinda oddly, i.e., they're probably a little bit more dangerous than the other ones. And number two is that he has several emails from customers talking about how his inventions have hurt or maimed their customers. So if Edwin says they're working fine, I don't really trust that. I'm just gonna say that. This leads me to think that they are different from most spring locks, potentially more fatal. Because spring lock accidents aren't necessarily the whole shebang, the whole that William got. Because, fun fact, and this is probably my favorite piece from all of the emails, Phone Guy has been spring locked. Phone Guy's been spring locked before, and he survived. He just went to the hospital. It was an accident. It was a bad deal, but like, I have to assume that the fact that he's still working, he's still fine, he's still chipper. He doesn't have any limps or anything like that. At least not when he was talked about in this. Like, he worked fine, he moved fine. Makes me think that spring lock accidents in Edwin's factory are not the life-threatening situation that they are in a Fazbear company. And to me, this explains how the diners could have been running for so long, but after Edwin, they kind of discontinued the springlock suits pretty fast. Now, then there's my rant about the Unwithered in the FNAF 1 animatronics. That doesn't make any sense. They're for the 90s, but it's being made in the 70s. You know, that's that stuff that I said. There's a very simple answer, and a lot of you guys pointed it out, and you guys told me that I should go read this book. And I don't know if you can see all these, but I have read this book. Up to page 64, because I cannot read. In the book, Ralph insinuates, and everyone's kind of taking it as fact, and it kind of makes sense, that Unwithereds / one are all the same. They're the same components, they're the same doodads, so that whole part of my rant, invalid. These guys, same guys. And me freaking out about like, but they were in the 90s. They were in the 90s. Again, if they're the same, then they first appeared in the 80s. So it's fine. We can actually see these animatronics completed in FNAF 2. See, in FNAF 2, there were cutscenes in between nights. Not the mini-games, but the actual cutscenes that go from left and right. You're on stage as Freddy, and you go left and right, left and right. I've always thought it was a flashback to FNAF 1, and I even think I directly refer to it as that in my, in the big video that people have seen for some reason. But somebody in the comments of the last video actually told me that that was probably a flashback to the MCI location, where these prototypes have turned into this. I just realized that my outfit is incomplete. There we go. For the accuracy, for the lore accuracy, for the lore accuracy. One of the other points I had that were saying, this doesn't make any sense, this doesn't make any sense, they don't make any sense, is that the diner ones and the prototypes seem to be being made and showed off and whatnot around the same time, which doesn't make any sense because the diner thing looked like it's made in the 70s, and then the other prototypes, they look much newer. There's no way that such a huge leap in quality could be accomplished in a small amount of time. Guess what, loser? Referring to me, not you. You're a big W mans, or womans, or NBS. I can think of 3 reasons off the top of my head that the quality changes. Number 1, budget. How much money was invested in each animatronic? If the diner animatronics were bought on a low budget, and the prototypes were bought on a high budget, that would explain it, right? Second being consistency. If the diners have been going on for a few years, and they have a certain image and a certain brand, they're probably making more spring locks in the same style as the first spring locks to keep a consistent image. So the style might be behind the times a little bit, intentionally. Number 3, the prototypes are prototypes. What does that mean? They're brand spanking new. Brand spanking new. Top of the line stuff. And new tech usually looks a little different than old tech. I mean, like, look at this. And look at this. New tech, old tech. Well, this is old tech now, but, like, you see my point? They look different because one of them is new, one of them is old, right? Design-wise. They could have come out of the factory at the exact same time, for all I know. They weren't, but my point is that they could, because different products look different. The demo room, right? The whole FNAF 1 being in the factory. I had a huge problem with this because I was like, this doesn't make any sense. This doesn't make any sense. Why would a location from the 90s be in a place from the 70s? What? Same reasons as the prototypes, right? The MCI location from the early 80s and the FNAF 1 location from the early 90s are the same building and assets. They just existed, went flip, FNAF 2 happened, that screwed up, they flipped again, and went back to the previous location. Simple as that, right? So this room is not for a place being made a decade from now, it's for a place that's being made through, 3 years from then, I think. As for the fact that they, modeled the whole building, well, 2 things. Number 1, everyone's pretty set on the fact that Fazbear's was trying to run Murray to the ground. So, the more resources Murray had to spend, the better for Fazbear. So they probably just asked for a pretty big demo, right? So they asked for unnecessary rooms. Number 2, Edwin loves to put on a show. Half of the stuff we go through in the game is demo rooms. The big top showroom's a demo room. Jackie's box thing's definitely a demo room. The first thing we see when we walk into the place is a demo room. The bro loves his demo rooms. So of him having a demo room for the upcoming project he's working on, it makes perfect sense. There's nothing wrong with that. I will say, though, I do find it pretty odd to put the cradle, into the security office. I find it odd. It's not impossible. I mean, it's a big hunk of junk, and he's got to need to put it somewhere. He has a lot of ways to do it, but I guess the cradle could be responsible for, the actual show we see put on when we, die? No, when we die? In the credits, when we're whatever. We're Freddy Fazbearing. We're Fazzing. Nothing wrong with this shit. Another point to go over is that I was sure that the ending where everything burns down to the ground and you actually go to the FNAF 1 location and all that, I was so sure that was not canon. Why was I so sure of that? Because number 1, I thought it was stupid and didn't make any sense. Number 2, it reminded me of Burn Trap. I was like, what? Secret location of previous location? Burn Trap. So I was like, well, Burn Trap wasn't canon, so this isn't canon. Flawless logic. When, in reality, this is actually probably the most canon, or the canon ending. Now, there are 3 endings of the game that at least I know of, unless there's like a super duper 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 secret ending that I haven't heard of. Number 1 is the ending that I got, which was lame. It was, I go outside, mimic escape. You know. Then there's the good ending, right? Now, good ending is, my name is Mimic. Wait, no, it's David. And then, bam, he's David. Non-hostile. It's the good ending, right? Then there's the third ending, this ending that we're talking about, where you go to the Flammable location and you meet the Cradle, and she tells you to go to Edwin's house, and get shit done. And then you go. And then, through an unfortunate series of events, everything is on fire. And then you escape going, and there's a bunch of Flintstones? A bunch of Jetson-looking guys coming after you. And the Mimic too. And the Mimic kills you. And takes the information that is his schematics and whatnot. And then he just walks off. Right. Now, in my opinion, there are 2 possible canon endings. Which one it isn't? The good ending. Why is the good ending not canon? Was FNAF 3 good ending canon? Nah, it weren't. Why not? Because the story would be over. Also, he's just like, the Mimic is friendly. The Mimic is not a threat anymore after the good ending. And like, I don't know if you've played Ruin, but he is very much not a tiny little guy. Which is why the 2 other endings are possible. Because the Mimic is still hostile. Still violent. Which means they can continue the other thing. But in both of those 2 endings, he escapes. Which out of 2 of those are canon? Is it the one where a FNAF game ends at 4 a.m. or 6 a.m.? I'm sorry, but there are other reasons, but that alone just sells me on it. You can't have a Five Nights at Freddy's game, and it's like, yeah, at 4 a.m., game over. That's canon. No, it's not. I don't believe you. I'm not taking that. So I think the F10 ending is canon. But with it being canon, one thing happens that affects 2 things, and I've mentioned it a few times. The whole demo room. What does that mean? It means that the prototypes and the spring locks might just be lost, gone, dead, broken, kaput, right? Das nicht gut. And if that's the case, then that would mean that every animatronic we've seen, not counting Sister Location, it's still Henry stuff, right? Because if they were like, we got the MCI location animatronics, oop, there was a fire, they're gone, and Henry's gonna be like, oh, fine, I'll make this shit myself. Or like, oh, the Italy Diner animatronics, they're ready. They got a little water damage, but Edwin said they're ready. There was a fire. Oh, whoops. And then Henry's gonna go, oh shit, I'll make it myself. But Fazbear has searched burnt down buildings before. I'm pretty sure the glitch trap virus came from them searching a burnt down Fazbear location. So them searching a burnt down Edwin location and finding some stuff. I'd buy it. If that was the case. Which, it's speculation, but if that was the case, then Springtrap, Fredbear, and half of the FNAF Classic cast are Edwin. But everything else is still Henry. Which brings me to my point about Henry. I said in that original video that he, as a character, has been poached, essentially. Edwin took all of the cool things that Henry has done, and it's just like, that's mine now. This is mine now. And I was crying about that. I was like, Henry is now just a businessman like William, because he actually didn't make anything. But as we just talked about, he for sure made a lot of stuff. And sure, Henry is no longer the creator of the spring locks. And sure, if the things survive, the classic and the spring locks aren't really his either. But again, that's speculation. They could have been lost and he could have made them anyways. What this means is that as far as canonical Henry is concerned, the game canon, he hasn't really been changed or interfered with. Really, Secret of the Mimic actually gave us more of Henry than we've seen, and I'm thankful for that. I don't know if you can tell, but he's a little high up on my favorite list. My point about the family-run vibes being ruined by the family-run business already being a big corporation, commissioning big factories and whatnot, is also kind of negated. I do kind of believe that still. I feel like 1983 is very much not the small family restaurant era of Fazbear's. I don't think it is, not even close. And that is what I was bothered by. So I still stand by that. But that aesthetic and vibe isn't gone. It's just been moved to whenever the first diner opened. Because at that point, it was definitely still a relatively small thing. With Fall Fest and a family restaurant, I don't know, that does kind of give the homey family-run vibe that I really liked from the 83 diner that we used to think it was associated with, but we just moved it a little back, which is fine. Now, in me going, everything's so different, the story's suffering from growing pains, I said that to avoid these growing pains and conflicts and all that, they should focus to a narrower time frame. My opinion on that statement now is, nuh-uh. I also mentioned how cool it is that the whole timeline expands over like 100 years, roughly. I think that's really cool. I'm okay with seeing more of that. That's super cool. We just have to be welcoming to new characters. Me very much included. I get a little defensive about my little guy. In conclusion, my old man yells at sky rant was very old man yells at sky, was nonsensical, and this video was made to correct that, because I don't want people to come to this channel and just get blatant misinformation, right? Not if I can help it. I'm okay with wild speculation, but blatant misinformation, I like to avoid that if I can. It's not entirely bogus to say that Edwin messes with Henry and Fredbear's legacy. He does. Just not a lot, and not to a problematic degree, which is perfectly okay. I hope you enjoyed this reanalysis of my botched analysis. I wouldn't have made it if it wasn't for you guys in the comments telling me that I'm big and stupid. That's a bit harsh. I mean, you saw errors in my video and you told me where I was wrong. And it's when you told me that I went, this needs an overhaul. This is very wrong. But there was also a lot of people that did like it, which I'm very grateful for. If you like this, there are a few more videos in this kind of vein on the channel. If you have any thoughts, if I got something wrong again, feel free to comment it, and remember to subscribe, because if you do that, then I'm encouraged to make more videos. Thank you for watching, and toodles. I'm gonna do step down. I'm gonna go down.